What's up, everybody? Today's video is the disgraces of World Cup Qatar 2022. My name is Greg, an American living abroad in Spain, learning the beautiful game of football, one question at a time with your help. And today's video is brought to you by Macwell. I will include a link in the description so you can show him some love. I'm sure he would definitely appreciate that. Now, this was a recommendation that came through our Discord by my man, Marcel. Always has great stuff to recommend. This is super interesting. I mean, I do know that, I don't know a lot about what happened in Qatar, but I've heard about corruption and all of this crazy stuff that went on over there. So definitely want to check it out. Before we get going here, go ahead and like the video. That'd be awesome. Let's go.
The winner to organize the 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
Qatar.
On December 2nd, 2010, Qatar won the 2022 FIFA World Cup bid, beating out rivaling Asian countries and the heavily favored United States bid. Qataris celebrated in the streets soon after, with the Qatar Stock Exchange shooting up in trading. But this wasn't just a World Cup for Qatar, it was also for the Middle East. Many Arab countries would see this as encouragement to grow and prosper. World Cup 2022 could bring a needed positive sense of the Middle East across the globe that could drown out the negative global stereotypes that held the region and its people hostage. Just one slight problem though. The bid was corrupt. But before we begin, hey, did you know I'm on a podcast now? Subscribe to the Next Generation Football Podcast. Listen to me and my partner Shayan talk about the current events of football, whether it be the Premier League, Champions League, and even international break. Oh, what's that? You don't like watching podcasts? Don't worry, because every episode is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. So if you want to bike in the city lights of Shinjuku while listening to two men debate who wins Ballon d'Or, you absolutely can. So be sure to subscribe to the Next Generation Football Podcast today. Oh yeah, can we get 200 likes? Thanks. Throughout the last 10 plus years, Qatar's GDP had skyrocketed thanks in part to steady oil production and high natural gas production.
Okay, so the 10 plus years before they won the game, or before they were awarded the games.
GDP had skyrocketed thanks in part to steady oil production and high natural gas production. In order to become an even larger powerhouse in the Middle East and in the world, Qatar used their funds to diversify the economy in other industries, one of them being sports. And what better way to invest into sports than to host the world's largest tournament? Furthermore, Qatar was 114th in FIFA rankings at the time. They had never qualified for a World Cup. Oh, and did I mention the country has a desert climate? But one can't simply just cry corruption with such surface level statements.
I kind of see what he's saying. Like they were awarded the biggest, really probably the biggest sporting event in the world, and they haven't done much in the way of football. So that is interesting. But that's pretty cool though.
They had never qualified for a World Cup. Oh, and did I mention the country has a desert?
It's pretty cool.
Climate, but one can't simply just cry corruption with such surface level statements. So we gotta dig a little deeper. Of the 24 eligible voters in the 2022 World Cup bidding process, 10 were either indicted, pled guilty, or straight up banned from the sports. Of those 10 include the likes of Chuck Blazer, who pled guilty to corruption charges in the 2015 FIFA-gate scandal. FIFA Vice President Michel Platini, who was banned in 2015 for life from all football activities for ethics violations. And even FIFA President Sepp Blatter, who was banned in 2015 for 8 years for also being a part of the 2015 FIFA-gate scandal. And just recently, both Michel Platini and Sepp Blatter were indicted on fraud charges. In 2011, Lord Treisman, a former England 2018 bid chief, said 4 FIFA executive members approached him for various things in exchange for votes. One of which was Jack Warner, who once in 2015 used a news article from The Onion, a fake news site mind you, as defense against FIFA corruption allegations. He too was indicted, by the way. Again in 2011, the Sunday Times published claims from a whistleblower that African Confederation President Issa Hayato and executive committee member Jacques Anouma, who both voted for Qatar, were reportedly paid 1.5 million USD by the nation invasion. And then just last year in 2020, US prosecutors revealed new details about alleged bribes amongst 3 South American officials, which included Nicolas Leos, former president of CONMEBOL. The largest investigation into the corruption allegations was Michael J. Garcia's report dubbed the Garcia Report. Garcia's intention was to investigate the bidding processes of 2018 and 2022 respectively. After 2 years, in 2014, a 350-page report was submitted. However, instead of releasing the full report to the public, Garcia's partner, Hans-Joachim Eckert, FIFA's head of adjudication on ethical matters, released a 42-page summary instead.
I wonder why.
The summary cleared Qatar and Russia of any wrongdoing, instead actually criticizing the other bidding countries more harshly. Garcia criticized the summary, saying it was materially incomplete with incorrect representations of the facts and conclusions. He then later resigned in protest after his appeal to FIFA was denied, citing a lack of leadership and loss of confidence in the independence of colleague Eckert. 2 days after Garcia's resignation, FIFA's executive committee decided not to revisit the 2018 and 2022 bidding process and would release a legal-friendly version of the Garcia reports. But then 3 years later, in 2017, German news source Bild revealed they had received a copy of the full Garcia report.
Yeah, let's go, Germany.
And intended to publish it. FIFA, on the ropes, finally released the reports in full on June 27th. Once the full report was released, it was realized quickly that Eckert's 42-page summary was a complete whitewash. Eckert's summary of the Qatari bid was 4 pages long, concluding despite potentially problematic conduct, the Qatari were all in all not suited to compromise the integrity of the FIFA World Cup 2018-2022 bidding process as a whole. The Garcia report, on the other hand, spent 124 pages on Qatar's bid alone, displaying several different incidents from every perspective. In no way did it ever absolve the Qatari bid of any wrongdoing. Eckert's summary also used words like well thought, robust, and professional to describe FIFA's bidding process, whereas Garcia instead used the word flawed commonly throughout the entire report. One thing I find kind of amusing is when Eckert cut out this statement from the original Garcia reports. Like them, I gotta give Eckert some credit. At least he was smarter than whoever helped write the FIFA.
Whoa. What's the statement? As head of FIFA, however, President Blatter bears some responsibility for a flawed process that engendered deep public skepticism, and for presiding over an executive committee whose culture of entitlement contributed to many of the issues this report identifies.
Garcia reports. Like them, I gotta give Eckert some credit. At least he was smarter than whoever helped write the FIFA movie.
I'm not responsible for what might have happened prior to my presidency, which you choose to call embezzlement.
You're the Secretary General, for God's sakes. Either you knew, which makes you just as guilty, or you didn't, which makes you a bloody fool.
Worker abuse? What the?
Qatar lacked enforcement of its existing worker protection laws. As a result, studies reported high death rates amongst workers. The country's history concerning workers' rights was a topic even before the announcement of the World Cup, with many global companies involved in Qatari construction projects being under investigation concerning workers' conditions. 95% of Qatar's labor force are migrants. They come to Qatar in hopes of better opportunity and higher wages. Their visas, which grant them legal residence to the country, are sponsored by their employers. This is what is called the kafala system. How it works is a migrant will usually pay a sponsor around 500 to 4,300 USD to provide them a job. Their sponsor or employer, basically the same thing, are responsible for wages, working conditions, living conditions, and entry or exit from Qatar. In order to appeal to the migrant who wanted to leave their home country for better opportunities in Qatar, the sponsor would promise such things as higher wages, good accommodation, and excellent working conditions. Once the migrant was at their new workplace to sign the contract, they'd quickly realize that all those promises were nothing but lies.
This one, the first contract, he's sending to the agent in Kenya.
Yeah.
So we know he came in here because of this salary.
So they show you this contract.
Yeah.
And this is the contract that you assign initially.
Yeah.
Basic salary.
His basic salary is stated to be 1,100 rials, about $300 a month. It says he will be provided with decent accommodation, food money, and a ticket home after the 2-year period.
Then when you land here the first day, they are in airport. You check all the passport.
Yeah.
And he said tomorrow morning you have to arrive in office to sign in.
Yeah.
When you go to the office, he changed another contract. And it's this one.
Oh,
the basic salary here is 500.
But this is
You see, leave salary that rate is 100. And this one, food allowance is 100. So total salary here is 700.
But the migrant could just refuse the contract and go back home, right? Unfortunately not.
No, because they took his passport, I think. Yeah.
Because even before the contract meeting, their passport is confiscated. They can't leave the country without it. But it isn't just that. It's also the migrants' desperation to eliminate debts and provide for their families back home. They'd do anything and be subjected to anything to make it happen. The sponsors knew that, which has led to some of the most appalling working and living conditions in the modern era.
God.
The climate in Qatar sees summers with intense heat reaching up to 50 degrees Celsius, as there is no way a game of
50 degrees Celsius.
See summers with intense heat reaching up to 50 degrees Celsius.
God.
As there is no way a game of football can be played in those conditions, FIFA moved the World Cup to the winter. But unlike FIFA, who can simply avoid the dangerous beaming sun, migrants are forced to work in these searing temperatures without any days off. And if a worker does take a day off, their wage is cut off not for 1 day, but 3 to 4, or even more. Oftentimes when workers complained or seeked help, they'd be intimidated or even threatened by their employers.
We've heard there's a lot of people dying from heart attacks.
From labels, you mean?
Yeah.
Of course.
And why is that?
Too much work.
As a result of all of this,
of course. Oh my God.
Many migrant workers who were deemed healthy would die of heat stress and cardiac arrest due to sitting out in the heat for long periods of time. Initially, the estimated number of worker deaths before a ball was kicked in 2022 was more than 4,000. But in 2021, The Guardian reported over 6,500 migrant workers from India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka had died in Qatar. When it came to living conditions, it was absolutely appalling, with migrant workers residing in cramped, dirty, and unsafe spaces. A room with 4 beds would often house more than 8 people, and the smell of ammonia reeked throughout the complex. A report in May 2018 showed a group of 1,200 workers were living without running water and electricity. And in many cases, workers weren't even paid in full. Mind you, overtime was required and there was no extra incentive for it. Sometimes payments would be delayed for several months or wouldn't even come at all, which meant workers would not be able to buy food, make payments for sponsor-related loans, or worse of all, provide for their families. Their kids back home couldn't afford school, and some of their families who fully relied on money abroad were on the brink of losing their homes. This created a disconnect and a mistrust amongst many families, with migrant workers' children asking in letters, when would they be back? The answer, probably never, or whenever the migrant worker's body would be sent back in a coffin. The most notable incidents of a violation of worker standards happened in 2019 when Tawassul, a subcontractor in the construction of Al Bayt Stadium, had been found to violate multiple standards for workers. For example, thousands of Nepalese migrant workers had their wages delayed while living in poor accommodation and working in hazardous working conditions. This incident would be the first ever to prompt FIFA to admit to violation of worker conditions on World Cup projects. It took them 9 years. Migrant workers did have the ability to report to the authorities if they felt their rights were being violated. However, because of the power the employers had on their workers, it was near impossible to do so. And if a worker did manage to report their situation, usually the authorities wouldn't do anything about it. Although in recent years, Qatar has introduced multiple reforms to help combat workers' rights violations. However, the weak implementation and enforcement of these laws have changed practically nothing for migrants. But in 2020, Qatar took a significant step towards migrant worker protection by passing 2 new laws. Before, workers
But this is all after they were already awarded the games. So, I mean, at this point, there's nothing they can do about it. Even if they do find out it's corrupt and all this other stuff that's going on.
Had to gain permission from their employer to change jobs. This was now abolished. Followed by that was a required minimum monthly wage. These 2 reforms sucked dry from the heart of the kafala system, which would for the most part end the exploitative system. But Qatar must strongly implement and enforce these laws, otherwise again, there will not be any change. What really sickens me though is how FIFA have used Qatar's reforming efforts as a way to paint the organization as heroes.
When we think about all the debates, discussions on human rights, on workers' welfare, well, without the World Cup, these debates would not have happened, and the improvements which have happened would not have happened.
That's right, folks. FIFA has ended slavery.
Blindness. Oh, here we go.
Qatar has done an exceptional job at making sure that mainstream media only sees what Qatar wants them to see. Anytime a journalist makes an official visit to Qatar, the country sets up temporary camps that hide journalists and other staff from the horrifying ugliness of slave labor outside the camp grounds. The camp houses tens of thousands of migrant workers in clean conditions, the exact opposite of what these workers actually have to endure. Journalists are even able to interview migrant workers, but only ones selected by their superiors, who would also supervise during the interview. In a way, it's like Qatar's extreme version of Rio's walls that hid the favelas from the Olympic tourists. Another issue I've noticed with the media is their passiveness in interviewing those managing the Qatar World Cup, like Hassan Al-Thawadi and Nasser Al-Qatar. In no way do you ever feel like these men are being challenged in issues that have been haunting preparations for a decade now. But you'd still want to expect more hard-hitting questions about such massive figures like death tolls involved in World Cup Qatar preparations.
6,500 workers did not die on World Cup stadiums.
He's right. It's actually more probably due to the number being a rough estimate and not even counting migrants from other countries including Kenya and the Philippines. Yet instead of saying that, the interview just accepts whatever Al-Thawadi says. One documentary that really caught my eye was Sky Sports' Gary Neville in Qatar, which felt more like a propaganda film than any intention to get to the bottom of what was happening to workers. In one scene, Gary asked a group of Kenyan workers if they had been paid their wages or not, to which they reply no. What follows is Gary notifying what I can only assume are the employers on the camp. And it just feels so off because the employer starts acting like the workers have misunderstood something, but they hadn't been paid in months. Neville gets to interview both Al-Thawadi and Al-Qatar.
And who knows what happened once that it was over. Those dudes are probably in big trouble now. Oh, wow, that's super interesting.
But they hadn't been paid in months. Neville gets to interview both Al-Thawadi and Al-Qatar as well, and just like the mainstream media journalists, he's really passive with both of them. But in this case it makes sense, because it's Gary Neville. He's a former footballer, not a journalist. But in Al-Thawadi's interview, he claims only 3 worker-related deaths occurred, and Neville in the next scene says, "We can't disprove 3. And we certainly can't prove 6,500. The f*** do you mean we can't prove it? There's embassy reports from multiple countries on how many migrant workers have died. Did anyone give Gary just a little more than surface level research? Who the f*** wrote this? The other thing about the worker rights violation stories that I've noticed is it completely exposes the American mainstream media that is driven predominantly by revenue. In the 11 years since the Qatar bid won, American news media have barely touched upon the problems in Qatar. This is both sides of the coin, by the way, left or right. There has been barely any spotlight on any of these problems. The American mainstream media companies do not actually give a single about humanity. Last year, when they were covering Black Lives Matter for a good month, it was considered at its peak. But once BLM was less popular, they just stopped talking about it. It wasn't like racism had been solved or anything, it was simply due to it not being relevant anymore. Then, when Stop Asian Hate caught the eye of millions in the country, news media followed suit. And once again, after about 2 weeks, Stop Asian Hate was no longer relevant and was no longer being covered. By the time World Cup 2022 is around the corner, I really doubt the slave labor will be covered. It'll have been way too late, and the focus overall will probably be on the breathtaking stadiums ready to host the world's largest tournament. As much as FIFA, the Qatari government, and many other parties are directly responsible for these disgusting atrocities we have seen throughout the last decade, the mainstream media in the US has done a terrible job at bringing attention to these issues.
Hate, not love. Uh-oh.
Laws in Qatar are very anti-LGBTQ+. Same-sex marriage is illegal, and any same-sex couple is deemed unfit to be guardians. Employment discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation is not prohibited. Any act of promoting same-sex relations can be considered promoting a criminal offense, and any pro-LGBTQ+ content can be censored. When asked about these concerns, President at the time Sepp Blatter simply said, "I would say they should refrain from any sexual activities." This was the FIFA president for over 15 years, folks. It is said that for any Muslim who is homosexual, that's punishable by death. Record shows no evidence of a Muslim being given the death penalty for this though, which may sound good on the surface, but it very much could be a similar situation like the Muslim LGBTQ+ members in Saudi Arabia, who constantly live in a state of fear as they hide their identity from the public eye. Qatar did announce last year in December that the country would allow LGBTQ+ displays and rainbow flags in stadiums, which again sounds good on the surface, but what needs to happen are reforms to Qatar's anti-LGBTQ+ laws. Because I fear once the World Cup ends, Qatar will go back to its normal anti-LGBTQ+ agenda, because the only reason why the country would allow displays in the first place is because of FIFA's pressure. But once that pressure is gone, who's gonna stop Qatar then? So will I be watching the World Cup next year? Of course. I'll have waited 4 years for the world's largest spectacle to return. I don't feel guilty, and you shouldn't either. The atrocities that practically built this tournament were not
okay. So yeah,
caused by us football supporters. We are mere pawns in FIFA and Qatar's abhorrent scheme. The parties at the top involved in the preparations for this World Cup are the ones that should feel the guilt, because those are the people who have blood on their hands. And I get that by producing a video like this, I'll sound hypocritical, but the intention of this video is to inform people and spread awareness. That's it. It's not like this video could help change something, because it won't. In a world driven by profit, we as football supporters do not have a voice in the matter, and the higher-ups who look at us supporters as mere numbers know that. If you thought the Super League was stopped because of the world of football supporters uniting against it, you're dead wrong. It was simply because every other federation and league saw this as a threat to their own profits. I commend footballers with their human rights t-shirts, but that's not going to change anything unless the federations themselves act. And by the looks of it, that ain't happening. But what I will say is, if you decide to watch the World Cup next fall, don't forget about the atrocities that helped prepare 90% of this tournament.
Everybody watched
What you'll see surrounding 22 footballers are structures holding 60,000 fans, built by slaves who worked to death in the excruciating heats, who were subjected to some of the worst living conditions, and who were promised false hope through the manipulation of their own desperations.
Damn. Man, that was a good one. Thanks, Marcel, for that. Definitely appreciate it. On your way out, like the video. As always, thanks for stopping by, and we will see you on the next video. Peace.